started with a dream, but not her own. The girl down the hall, the one with the chapped lips, and the ribbon around her ankle. She saw him first. The beaked mask, the black hat, and something twitching in the lining of his cloak. She whispered it through cracked teeth, just before the fever took her voice. A week later, the others began to dream him too, even the ones who didn't yet know they were ill. And then, one night, quiet as dust, he stood at the edge of her bed. Not moving, not breathing, not real, not yet. They wore the mask, yes, but not to scare. It was meant to protect them from the miasma, dried flowers, crushed herbs, vinegar-soaked sponges, all stuffed into the beak to cleanse the air and keep the rot away. But no one ever saw what was behind the glass. Not even once. Just before we begin, I wonder, where are you falling asleep tonight? And what time is it, as these words reach you through the dark? Because somewhere, in the folds of time, this story is still unfolding, like a nightgown laid over a cold body, like smoke curling beneath a door. Stories like this are not meant to be remembered. They return only when someone asks the wrong question at the right hour. You didn't mean to call it back, but here we are. They called it the quiet room at the edge of the old hospice, just past the garden wall. Children weren't meant to be housed there, but records went missing. Beds were rearranged, and when she arrived, wrapped in the scent of lavender soap and mothballs, no one could say for sure who signed her in. She kept a wooden toy horse in her hands. Even in sleep, it had one chipped wheel and a missing tail. She said it was a gift from someone she hadn't met yet. The nurses laughed at first, until they saw it roll from one bedside to another. At night, no one touched it. It simply moved. It was always the same sequence. A fever, a whisper, a dream. Then, the footsteps. Not fast, not urgent, just steady and wrong. Like someone walking in water a few rooms away. Her file had a different name, the kind with too many hyphens and not enough history. But she answered only to May. She had no parents listed, no visitors, no belongings but the wooden horse and the dreams that came earlier than they should have. She told the night nurse, the real one, that the plague doctor wasn't a person. He was a decision, a presence made of choices no one wants to take responsibility for. The nurse blinked, wrote nothing down. She'd seen too many children make symbols out of fear, but May didn't flinch. She said, "He's not looking for the sick ones. He comes for the ones who will be." It was hard to believe her. She was quiet, small, unremarkable to anyone outside that ward. But her words had the weight of something, borrowed from somewhere older. And the dreams spread, like breath on cold glass. I've seen his shadow too, that outline at the threshold, the glint of curved glass over hollow eyes. Not in a memory dash, but in the dreams of others. They come to me after, whispering pieces they couldn't carry alone. That's why I'm here. To keep them from disappearing. I don't cure. I collect. Some call me the Fever Herald. I arrive in stories that never leave the pillow, in the moments just before the sweating begins, when everything feels almost fine. The wooden horse returned again. Last night, this time in a room that had been locked since '74. No beds, no records, but the scent of burning herbs. And something carved into the floorboards. A date, a name, and the first letter of a girl. No one remembers. So that's where we begin. In the folds of fevered linen, with a name spoken through teeth too weak to bite. Not because she died, but because she remembered something. She should have forgotten. He came to her before the sickness, and still, no one believed her, not even the ones who dreamed of him next. They moved her to a new room after the first night. They said the old one had mold, too damp, too cold, too close to the chapel bell that wouldn't stop ringing, even after the clapper was removed. But that wasn't the reason. The reason was the girl in the cot beside her, who woke up screaming at 3:12 a.m. and couldn't say why. Just clutched her belly and bled from the nose, as if something inside had decided it no longer wanted to stay. May had warned them. She said the man in the mask stood between their beds with one gloved hand, resting on her wooden horse. They didn't believe her. Not the night nurse. Not the priest who came too late. Not the janitor who found the other girl's pillowcase, folded like a shroud, because May never raised her voice, never cried, never begged. She simply said, "He comes to see who'll be missed the least." If you've ever felt invisible in a crowded room, you know what she meant. If you've ever been passed over for something small, a glass of water, a goodbye, a name, you've already brushed up against the kind of silence. He walks in. The second room had a painting on the wall, a woman pouring water into a cracked bowl. May hated it, not because of the painting itself, but because the woman had no face. Just a pale blur, like someone had tried to remember her and failed. She said the painting changed at night, that the bowl filled on its own, that the mask floated behind the woman's shoulder, but disappeared before sunrise. The staff started keeping notes, not in the charts, but on scraps, corners of napkins, the backs of donation envelopes, things that could be thrown away, if anyone asked. They called it the shrinking. How her fever never rose. But something around her kept getting colder. Plants wilted in their pots. Candles refused to hold flame. Ink smudged without reason. And the wooden horse, it kept turning toward the window, even when there was no wind. She told me once, when her eyes were too heavy to open, "He doesn't need to knock. He's already been invited. Every time someone ignores the dream, the door swings a little wider." The janitor quit, left his boots in the stairwell. The new girl they hired lasted 3 days, said she couldn't sleep in the staff quarters. Not with the sound of hooves. On the floor above. There was no floor above. Here's what no one says out loud. The mask wasn't always made of leather. In the oldest records, it was porcelain, pale, glazed, with 2 holes for the eyes and 1 small slit at the mouth for breathing smoke, a French surgeon once claimed. The beak was shaped that way, to funnel the spirit of pestilence back toward the heavens. But the wind never listened. One nurse, the oldest one, the one with the key, tried to burn the toy horse. She placed it in the stove. Before dawn, watched the flames curl around it with that flat, tired look people wear when they've seen too much and remember too little. But when she came back to May's room, it was there again. Same chip in the wheel, same tilt in the neck. Only now there were dark smudges on the cot sheet, like soot or ash, or something that had tried to crawl out of the fire. Do you feel it yet? That soft press behind the eyes. When a story stops being fiction, it's all right. You're not alone. The dreams didn't start with her. She just listened better than most. She asked them one last question. Before the next child vanished from the ward, why do you only see his face after the fever starts? The worst part wasn't the fever. It was the night she stopped dreaming. Just silence. Like the air itself refused to speak. No visions, no visitors. Just the wooden horse on the nightstand tipped onto its side, its wheel broken clean through, and on the wall, a smear of something dark. Beneath the faceless woman's painting, finger length, 3 strokes, like someone trying to write, but forgetting the letters. When she awoke, May asked no questions. She simply turned to the nurse and whispered, "He's not wearing the mask anymore." No one understood what that meant, but they felt it. The air changed. The temperature stayed the same, yet everyone shivered. A shadow passed in front of the stained glass hallway window, with no one on the grounds, a copper handle burned to the touch. Though the fire in the stove had long gone out, even the birds stopped landing on the ledge. I remember a boy who once claimed the plague doctor wasn't a person at all. He said it was a thought. The moment you wonder if you're going to get sick, that's when he arrives. He didn't survive the season, but his words stuck with me. Words that sound like metaphor until they come true. They locked May's room, moved the other patients out, posted a priest outside the door who wore gloves and slept in a chair. He didn't last, refused to say what he saw. Through the keyhole, only muttered, "His eyes are glass, but they watch." That was the week the nurse brought me in. She'd heard of my work, the stories I keep, the names I remember. I don't enter through the front gate. I arrive where the dreams grow thickest, and that night, they curled around the windows like vines. She didn't look up when I entered, just pointed at the wooden horse and asked, why would he bring it back if it no longer rolls? It was then I noticed it. The wheel, cracked and still, but now carved with lines, tiny etched shapes, not words, not letters, more like scratches left by teeth. And inside the hollow of the toy's belly, something rattled. I didn't open it. Some things are meant to remain sealed. like fevered promises, like names whispered during burial rites. The painting was gone. In its place, a small mirror, cracked at the corner, hung too low to show a full reflection. But if you stood just right, you could see the shape behind you. Tall, bent slightly forward, beaked nose, pressing gently toward the glass. I closed my eyes, breathed in. The room smelled of vinegar and dried lavender and something old, like crushed linen in an iron chest. It reminded me of a cure. Used in 1643 Four Thieves vinegar, a blend of garlic, mint, and wormwood, said to ward off infection if sprinkled at thresholds and rubbed behind the ears. But here, it seemed more like a memory than a safeguard. I asked her if she wanted to leave. She shook her head. "He followed me once," she said. "Before the dreams, before the fever, when I still lived by the orchard, and thought masks were only for parties." I sat beside her, not to offer comfort, but to listen. Because sometimes the fever doesn't need a cure. It needs a witness. She took the wooden horse and pressed it to her chest, closed her eyes, and then said very softly, "He has a new face now. It's not leather, not porcelain. It looks like someone I used to love." That's when I knew. It wasn't just the plague doctor returning. It was grief, given form, drawn back to the ones who had no time to say goodbye. Grief with a beak. Grief with hands too cold to hold. Grief that walks in through dreams and waits by the bed until you're too tired to argue anymore. Would you have opened it? The toy, the mirror, the dream? Would you have looked back to see what stood behind you? They moved her again, but not to a different room. This time, it was the room that changed. The ceiling, once pale blue, now bore the faint trace of a ring, as if a chandelier had once hung there, though no such fixture had ever existed. The mirror was gone. The painting returned. But now, the woman held nothing in her hands. Her palms were outstretched, as if offering something that had already been taken. May didn't speak for 2 days. No fever, no tremble, just quiet. Even the nurses grew unnerved by her stillness. They whispered that her pulse was wrong. Not fast, not slow, but slightly behind, as though her heart was listening to another rhythm, somewhere far away. It was then. The wooden horse cracked open. No one saw it happen. No one heard a sound. But the next morning, it sat split in two on her nightstand. Inside it, a bundle of black thread, a sliver of glass, and one tooth. Small. Too small to be hers. She looked at the objects as if they were familiar, as if she'd been waiting for them to be returned. I asked her what they were. She said, "They're pieces of what he leaves behind." I asked why he would hide them inside the horse. Her eyes finally met mine. "Because I stopped dreaming, and he needs a place to keep them now." The next day, it rained. Not outside Dash, but in the hallway. Moisture pooled beneath the ceiling tiles. Walls dripped as if exhaling. Mildew bloomed where light had touched the day before. The hospice staff called in repairmen. They found nothing. No pipes, no breaks, just condensation in the shape of handprints sliding down the glass. There's an old superstition, one that's hard to trace. Some said it came from Belarus, others from the Black Forest. When the fever sleeps in a child too long, the body forgets what belongs to it. That's when the visitor arrives. To take what remains. The tooth was missing by nightfall, not misplaced. Gone. The split horse remained. The thread undisturbed. The sliver of glass, now resting beneath her pillow. She said it helped her see things no one else could, but only if she looked. With her eyes closed, she began humming, not words, just a tune that seemed older than language. Some of the staff recognized it, though none could name it. They claimed their grandmothers had hummed it while boiling herbs or sewing buttons onto morning coats. The air itself held the sound even when her mouth was still. By then, no one entered her room alone, except me. I returned each evening to bear witness, to mark the changes, to remember what wouldn't make it into the official records. The woman in the painting changed again. This time, she wore a mask, but not the beaked one. A cloth mask, like the kind worn in 1918. Simple, folded, frayed at the edges. She held the wooden horse in her arms. Only now, it was whole again. I asked May how she felt. She said, lighter. And then, after a pause, but not better. Sometimes, that's how the sickness works. It doesn't take your life. It takes your weight, your sound, your sleep, until even your reflection feels like a stranger, just trying on your face. I once met a girl who claimed the fever had a shadow, not a shape, but a memory, that followed too close and whispered things out of order. It showed me the end first, she said. Then let me live the rest. That's what this was becoming. Not a haunting, not an illness, but a reordering, a slow unraveling of time, memory, and self. The pieces tucked into the toy were more than artifacts. They were symptoms, evidence that the visitor was no longer knocking. He was inside the room. She pressed the bundle of thread into my hand, said nothing, but her gaze lingered, and I knew what it meant. You remember now. They say it happened before, not just once, but over and over. In mountain villages where the winters came early, in boarding houses that closed without notice, in one-room schoolhouses where half the desks sat empty by spring. The same dream, the same object, the same shape watching from the end of the bed. Only the names changed, only the children forgot. There was one tale, buried in the archives of a monastery, that no longer exists. A girl named Liska, whose dreams began 3 days before the cough. She left behind no diary, but in the margins of a hymn book, someone scrawled this: he walks with a candle in his mouth. The wick never burns down. They called him the Hollow Physician. never written in Latin, only whispered dash, as if even ink could become infected. And always a toy. In Liska's time, it was a spinning top that never slowed. In Krakow, a child clutched a broken tambourine. In a village outside Lisbon, they found a wooden rattle, still vibrating in the crib. No one knew who carved them. But everyone bore the same mark, a small crack that widened by morning. When May handed me the bundle of thread, she was adding to that pattern, passing it forward, not as a warning, but as proof. Because if there's one thing fever always erases, it's memory. And memory is the only thing that can hold a name in place. I asked an old herbalist once why the dreams always come before the fever. She said, because the body listens last, but the soul hears first. I believe that now, because this isn't a new sickness. It's a very old one that's just good at changing shape. A dream here, a shadow there, a toy on the floor that no one remembers buying. They used to keep masks over the fireplace, not for decoration, for protection, not against disease, but to confuse it, to make the sickness think. You are someone else. That's why the masks changed. Leather, porcelain, cloth. Not to filter air, but to mislead the dark. The wooden horse had a mark on its underside, too faint to notice at first. But when I turned it in the right light, it looked like a sigil, one I'd seen before, carved into door frames in plague towns, drawn in ash at crossroads, a circle, a line, and a single dot in the center to represent the eye of the fever that sees without looking. They used to burn herbs in front of it and whisper old names, meant to keep the body intact until the danger passed. But the herbs went out, and the names were forgotten. May never said goodbye. She only looked out the window and said, "He's quieter now, like he's waiting for someone else." And maybe that's all the hollow physician ever does. Wait, in dream rooms, in sleep-heavy homes, in hospitals with flickering bulbs and records gone missing, waiting for the next person to forget what they saw. But I remember. I write it down, so you don't have to carry it alone. Because if the stories vanish, he comes back louder. Cultural echo line. They said it happened before, in another village, but no one remembers who she was. So I keep the horse, tucked inside a drawer lined with sage and salt, not to trap it, but to honor it, to remember the girl who saw him. Before the fever came, it started with a dream, and now it's silent again. The bed is empty, the painting is gone. Even the cracks in the ceiling have sealed themselves, as if the room had never been opened. Only the smell lingers, a mix of ash and lavender, like the afterbreath of a story that doesn't want to be told again. I kept the horse, not to protect it, not to study it, but because stories like this leave a space where something once lived, and the object becomes the echo, the proof that memory was not a fever hallucination, that she existed, that she dreamed first, that she warned us. The thread still sits inside the cracked belly of the toy. I've never removed it. and the sliver of glass. That I buried, somewhere quiet, where no one will look for it, where no one will try to see. What she saw, they say the fever's gone now, that no one dreams of him anymore, that no more children wake with ash on their fingertips. But dreams are not so easily cleaned. They settle like dust in the lungs, quiet, unnoticed, until someone laughs too sharply or forgets the smell of vinegar on a linen pillowcase, and the air stirs again. The mask may be gone, the hat, the gloves, but he was never dressed for the sick. He was always dressed for the forgotten, the ones who slipped through without anyone writing their names, the ones who warned but weren't believed, the ones who felt the fever long before it ever reached the skin. May is a name the staff no longer remembers. Her chart is gone. The ward was closed, but I remember her voice. He needs a place to keep the pieces. He's not looking for the sick ones. He comes for the ones who will be. Some nights, the horse rattles faintly when I move past the drawer. I never open it, not anymore. There's nothing else to find, only memory, folded like paper, softening at the edges. It started with a dream, but it was never really about the doctor. It was about the moment. We stopped listening. The breath before the cough. The flicker before the flame. The girl. No one asked. Where it hurt. You've heard it now. So you'll carry a part of it too. Not because you chose to, but because you stayed. Because you listened. Past the warning. Because you dreamed with her. For just a moment before the fever came. There's nothing else to do tonight but drift. Let the blankets rise like slow waves. Let your breath settle. Let your pulse. Keep to your own rhythm. The door's closed now, the candle's low, and the story has gone quiet. You're safe now. Sleep well. I'll be here when the lights go low again.